This is SS Wilson back again. My last two videos have focused on some problems that we had, but this one covers the day shooting Nestor's trailer, a mechanical effect that worked really quite well. In fact, the only problem we had on this day was that we had very little wind. But because on most days we had lots of wind, today we had to add wind so that shots from other days would match. That's why we had this on set, the Ritter fan, the classic Hollywood wind machine. Now, Brett and I had written some big movies by this time, but we hadn't worked on them. This was our own little movie that we were doing with our buddy Ron, and it was a kick to be able to afford a piece of iconic equipment like this.
First bump or second bump, Ron?
Second bump for that. First bump for the antenna.
Take two. Hold on.
Yeah, take two.
Ready? And for picture. Okay, that's going to go down the first bump.
Bounce right there, Mom. I'll make it work.
Ready?
Now, that's our stunt coordinator, Gary Jensen, up on the trailer there, stunting for Richard Marcus, who plays Nestor. I imagine Gary wanted to be up there first to be sure that whatever the trailer did, it would be safe for Richard to be up there later. Now, you heard Ron talk about first bump and second bump. Here they come. First bump is for the antenna over Gary's head. The second bump is for that big piece of corrugated roofing. All these things were worked out in great detail. So basically, the trailer would do this move all day long. I'll show you how it was done a little bit later. But I have to say, a big surprise for me when I rewatched all this old video is that we did not use some of the great moves the effects people had worked out to make it look like this trailer was being hit from below by a giant worm. Now, partly we didn't use it because the effects worked so well we could shoot way more footage than we needed. But as I look at it now, I kind of wish we had used a little more of what you'll see coming up. You'll have to decide for yourself. Meanwhile, there's my partner Brent moving in on Ron to give him all sorts of notes about what should happen in the next take. We both bugged Ron with suggestions anytime we were on set. He was pretty patient about it. Now you can hear our assistant director Mike again.
So, do we love this? Can we check gates?
All shot here, Mike.
Always pushing us to keep moving. So while Ron animatedly describes his next shot, I'm going to pause to mention what Mike is referring to, because it's a part of old filmmaking that almost doesn't exist anymore. Remember, this is back in the day. We're shooting movie film, which is not like taking video on your iPhone. There was no way to see what we had just shot until the next night. At the end of each day, the film was driven all the way to Los Angeles, processed in a laboratory, printed, that is, copied, and then the print driven back to us on location. So the first time we would ever see it was at the end of the next workday. We had a movie projector set up in the local restaurant, because there was no movie theater in Lone Pine. So before you left a setup, you had to do everything you could to make sure the film was okay. And one thing everybody did back then was check the camera gate. The camera crew actually opens the camera up and looks at the little metal window where the light hits the film to make sure there's no dust or lint stuck around the edges, which would show up in the final image, and also to make sure the film isn't being scratched. If they found anything, it meant your last take was no good, and you had to do it again. This is actually a little 8mm camera that I used to make my very first movies, but the idea is the same. Anyway, the camera crew said the gate was clean and we could move on to the next setup. And that involved a different way of moving the trailer, which was just to shove it with a tractor. We always tried to do every shot as simply as possible, and Ron had deliberately picked an angle where he knew the camera wouldn't see the tractor hiding back there. Now, part of the set dressing around the trailer was this old red truck that didn't run, and it had to be moved, I think, to make room for the tractor. And I love this moment, because on big movies, each department tends to defend its turf and only work on one area. The Tremors crew was all about getting things done. If the old truck had to move, everybody just pitched in and moved it. It was very gratifying. I imagine about every department on set is part of this team. So, we're ready for the next take, but I'm going to pause again. This was one of those big stunt days where we had a lot of visitors, and this visitor is particularly important. This is Jim Jacks, our main executive at Universal Studios. When the script was being submitted, our agent, Nancy Roberts, chose Jim as the one guy in Hollywood who would understand what Tremors was, and he did. And he was a major force in getting the studio to green light it. People find it hard to believe now, but Tremors was rejected by just about every other studio in town. Ironically, this is one of the very few pictures I have of Jim. Anyway, it was nice to have him there on a day that was going pretty well. So now, here we go.
We're gonna go MOS, Walt. What do you say?
That's a great idea. MOS on this.
Except, believe it or not, I'm going to digress one more time, because I've learned I need to explain what MOS means. It means without sound, and I point this out because I had a conversation with a young filmmaker a while back, and I realized that he had no idea that in the days of film, we didn't record sound and picture together. The camera got the picture, but the sound went on to a tape recorder like this one. Which is the reason for this, the slate used on every shot. Picture and sound stay separate all the way through post-production. The movie's editor reads the shot number on the slate, then listens for the number on the soundtrack, then matches the image of the slate and the click on the soundtrack to put the picture and sound in sync. Very simple. In this case, the camera assistant did a gag slate for Dad's video camera. Okay, enough film history. Here's that next shot.
And roll cameras, please.
And like most things today, it went quite well. Ron liked it, and we moved on.
Print out and go to.
That's a good cutting part.
Yeah, that's great.
Right after lunch, we'll be right back here. Right after lunch. To the camera.
And we were back after lunch with the real Richard Marcus up on the trailer. And now we'll get to see how they did that crazy rocking motion. These air-powered pistons work great, and they could be taken on and off the trailer very quickly, which gave us a lot of freedom. Also notice the fella shooting dust under the trailer. It was a constant struggle to try to get the dust levels to match from shot to shot. Here's Richard doing some of the action himself. The stunt coordinator had decreed that it was safe enough for him to be up there. Even so, they kept a huge green safety pad down below, just in case. I've actually strung together several takes here. When you have an effect that works as well as this one, you tend to just keep shooting it. The weather threw us a curve here. The clouds rolled in, so we had to put up one of our big lights to make it look like the sun was still shining. I was actually shooting with Dad's camera at this point and didn't notice right away that it had reverted to the wrong date again. The date is May 11th. I don't know if I got a January date on this thing or not. I didn't mean to. January 88. Now I've tried to set the date. I don't know if it's appearing on the tape or not. A little later, it's still me shooting video here, and I'm actually on top of the little shed that Melvin climbs in the movie. They were setting up for a different move of the trailer. Meantime, because the clouds have come in, it's very cold all of a sudden, even in May, so someone kindly brings Nestor a jacket to wear while they're waiting. But pretty quickly, they got ready to go with this next shot. And this is one of the ones that surprised me to see. It's pretty cool, but as you'll see, it's not in the final movie. I showed this clip to Ron Underwood, and he also does not remember why we cut it.
Hold it. Freeze. Everybody freeze.
Of course, at the time, we didn't know we weren't going to use it, so Alex and Ron hurried over to check the final angle in one of the cameras. They decided everything was okay, and we could say that we had another shot in the can. By that I mean, of course, in an actual tin can that we kept our movie film in. Now we were ready for the big stunt, where the graboid tips the trailer over and throws Nestor off. So why are these fellows digging up the ground?
Area for Gary Jensen, the stunt guy, to fall into.
Yeah, they're softening it up. Stunt guys are tough, but they don't want to land any harder than they have to. They also had to bury a cable that was right near where he was going to land, so the team checks with him about that.
I'm not worried about cable.
What are you worried about?
What about this, Andy?
And since it was a big stunt day, the set photographer was there with his several film cameras. They kept refining exactly where Gary was going to land using this very precise measuring system.
Stand there, John, right on the grass. No, my feet will be right where the grass is, John.
And how were we going to tip over the trailer? The simplest way, with our trusty tractor.
Everybody into position?
There's actor Robert Jane standing by because the next scene was Melvin on the little shed. And here Ron is probably giving Gary too much detail about the shot.
No, wait a minute. Tell me the cue. You're going to roll and then what?
Gary wants to know only one thing. When is that trailer going to flip over?
And it will be as hard a hit as possible to get you over.
Here we go.
You'll hit the ground.
You're damn right somebody hit the ground.
Roll.
But the clouds blocked the sun again, so Mike had to check if the light was okay.
So Alexander, do you like this window or what's going on?
And it wasn't, so we had to wait, which is frustrating because everybody's pretty tense on a shot like this, and we kept waiting, everybody watching the sky. But as soon as the sun came out again,
Roll sound.
How was that?
Bet you want to do it again, huh?
no, the stunt went perfectly. There's Gary and Richard together.
And maybe Richard gets in. Maybe we can do it all in this one shot.
Ron is looking ahead to a complicated shot that's coming later, where the dummy gets pulled into the tire. And that caused them to do some work on the cover of the giant pit underneath the tire. But before that, they had some smaller shots to get, where Richard Marcus matches the landing of Gary's stunt. Of course, we're always adding dust. The clouds were still coming and going, and DP Alexander was having to adjust the exposure for almost every shot. That's what he's doing right here. You can see him put his light meter back in its little holster. He also learns an important lesson: don't walk into the Ritter fan. They're already rolling right behind him, but luckily his hat didn't make it into the shot. Now we come to another of those sad moments with these old videotapes. It just stops. Maybe I had to leave to do something, or Dad took the video camera somewhere else. 30 years later, we just don't know. About the only thing left is this somewhat strange angle of the bottom of Nestor's trailer. But at least it's never been shown before. Anyway, I'll keep going through the stuff. See you soon with the next installment.